we need to get back to Dear Fangirl. Dear Fangirl is where you guys write in with any of your situations, concerns, or requests for advice, all Michael Jackson related or life related. And we let you know what it is that we think about it. So let's get into it. She wrote, Dear Fangirl.
I love this.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be reading a letter from Denzel. Thank you to Denzel for writing in. It's a little bit of a long one, so I think I'm going to read it. And then, Randall, what do you say? We'll tackle this together.
Let's do it.
All right. Dear Fangirl, I hope you're doing well. I've been a big fan of your channel for a while now and really admire the thoughtful way you approach everything Michael Jackson related. Your videos always bring so much clarity and nuance to conversations about his legacy, and I wanted to share something I experienced recently that I think could make for an interesting topic for you to explore. I was at a bar recently, and a woman noticed my Michael Jackson tattoo. We ended up having an amazing conversation about Michael, our favorite songs, deep cuts, unreleased records, and just geeking out over our shared love for him. But things took a weird turn when I mentioned that while Dangerous is a great album, it's clear Quincy Jones wasn't involved. She got offended. Then, when the topic of vitiligo came up and I mentioned creams he may have used to even out his skin, she became visibly upset, said I wasn't a real Michael Jackson fan, and stormed out of the bar. This stuck with me for days. It made me think about how, while most fans love and honor Michael for the incredible artist and person he was, there's a segment of the fan base that becomes incredibly defensive and even toxic when you don't share the exact perspective. It's almost like they have a parasocial relationship with him where he's beyond critique. All right, we got a little bit more of this to go. I understand where it comes from. Michael endured so much ridicule, pain, and misunderstanding throughout his life. Many fans feel the need to defend him at all costs, which is admirable in one sense, but in doing so, they sometimes ignore the fact that Michael was human, and like all of us, he was complex and he was flawed. This also, well, let's address that first part, because the second part gets into something different. The fan community and this whole thing about not wanting to critique Michael.
Do you want to get into that? You want to start?
Yes. So I'll say this. Yes, Michael Jackson was human. I think it's always interesting to look at him as through the lens of, yes, he was a human being. He wasn't like this otherworldly. He was an otherworldly performer and entertainer, but he was also human. And I think in order to be a fan, like, isn't it more interesting to like discover all the facets of somebody that we have access to, right? Because we could talk about critiques and praising him all day long, but we really only know what Michael allowed us to know, especially at that time. It's not like 2025 where all of the celebrities are on, they do something and you see it that same night on TikTok. Like it was a little bit different. So I feel like I like those conversations where we can get into like, a little bit of banter about Michael or, wondering about certain things, a little bit of speculation, as long as it's not done in a negative way. I feel like, why not?
I think I'm so glad that you read this letter, because I have this conversation a lot with some of my closer friends about how a lot of folks idolize him almost dangerously, and think that he did and could have done no wrong. I think it does a disservice to the music, to be honest, if you want to start there, because he sings about flaws. He sings about, stuff that he goes through or he went through.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like, leave me alone. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, talks about the stuff that he's going through and how it hurts because he's human. You know what I mean? So it doesn't do you any good to put this man on a pedestal and not acknowledge the realities that he faced and that ultimately showed up in the music. That's
absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. And I'm going to read the second half of his letter. because he gets into the biopic and how the biopic will address or not address some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Denzel continues, this also got me thinking about the upcoming biopic. On one hand, it could sugarcoat his story to cater to fans who want a sanitized portrayal, which might not help humanize him for a broader audience. On the other hand, if the film takes risks and delves into the nuances of his life, some fans might outright reject it as propaganda simply because it challenges their idealized view of him. I wanted to ask if you've ever thought about making a video on the topic of toxicity within the MJ fan base, specifically how some fans, while deeply loving Michael, may be contradicting his own message of love and understanding by being so combative or unwilling to see him as a human. I think it could spark a really meaningful conversation within the community and help us all better honor Michael's true spirit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, whether it's something you think it's worth addressing in a video. Thank you for taking time to read this and for all the amazing work you do. It means a lot to fans like me. Well, thank you, Denzel. I hope I hope that they address the real Michael Jackson in the biopic, even beyond what my understanding is as a fan. And I think Randall and I have talked about this in past episodes when we've talked about the biopic. I think it's important that they bring reality to the forefront because I think Michael Jackson is such a, he's such a figure, like a massive star, and he's almost looked at as like a caricature in some ways. And I think it's important to bring the humanity back to him.
I have two separate thoughts. Number one, from what I've heard from Antoine Fuqua, the director of this biopic, and as well as one of the producers who also produced Bohemian Rhapsody, I expect there to be a fully realized retelling of Michael's career and his life. The facts as we know them, some stuff we probably don't know. As much as, like you said earlier, as much as we knew up to that point, I'm sure there's going to be, new stuff in there. So I expect there to be some truth telling in there and some, they're going to put it out there. I don't expect, rainbows and potpourri of this biopic. Honestly, I would not like that movie. I wouldn't like it. And I think the estate knows that too, which is why they sign on board, like all that stuff. Like, they want to make sure that this is the biggest biopic ever. I'm hopeful that it will be. Jafar, you're going to kill it, dog. Like, I'm cheering you on. Like, everybody involved, I'm with y'all. Second part, when we talk about toxicity in the community, this is like my 2-minute spiel. I could probably do my own video on this, but I had a conversation on Facebook. I want to say this is around 2013. It used to be my pinned post on Twitter, maybe around 2016. But I was talking to somebody about, Michael and all his eccentricities and all the things that we know about him. And I was telling, I made a general post on Facebook that kind of referenced that. And I said, look, those of us that are fans, most of us have probably taken 5 minutes on the internet to look stuff up, at least just to make sure that we know what we're talking about. But then we get looked at as crazy because of that. Now, there are those of us who have a sober look, a sober perspective on Michael, like take everything into context, know that some stuff hit, some stuff didn't. Some stuff was great, some stuff might not have been as great, right? And take the totality of his career and life in full, right? There are some of us. I feel like I'm giving his speech at MTV 1995 VMA. Some of us, like some of us, we put the gold pants sheen on Michael, and be like, no, he could do no wrong. Like, this is
right.
If you don't like it, it's your fault. If you don't think it's great, you don't have good taste. If you think he did XYZ, that's because you aren't a redeemable person.
Mm-hmm.
And those people don't allow for a range of emotions and thought and feeling for in the middle of conversation. And so those are, quite frankly, the people that others outside of the community reference when they talk about Michael Jackson fans. They don't talk about those of us that have the sober perspective and can actually have a conversation and admit, all right, you got me on that one. All right, how about you open yourself up to that? Right. So it's that loud minority that quite frankly could be spoiling the fun for most of us.
Amen. And I will say that, like, that's why I love, like, a lot of the conversations that I've had with you and other fans on this show, is because we try to, of course we poke fun at things sometimes, but try to like really be honest about like our feelings, whether it's about the music or about like the choices that he made in the public or like the things that he might have said. And like that doesn't mean that we are trying to look at him in a negative light, but we're looking at him through the human light. I mean, he was a person at the end of the day, and like we can't forget about that. And I think if we do lose sight of that, we lose also a sight of like how great this man was when we talk about like all the things that he did to like surpass all of the expectations for him. He did so much of that and more, and with barriers and obstacles that he had to overcome. Like, how can you appreciate his greatness if you just like don't even look at him as a human being, you know?
So to that point about speaking about Michael in sober tones, I think about somebody like Beyonce, who many people reference nowadays as the greatest living performer, one of the greatest performers ever of all time. This is very clearly a person who has studied Michael Jackson in both admiration and as a cautionary tale. She most likely has seen Michael's ascent to the throne of being the king of pop and seeing all the pitfalls that he had to dodge and hop over to get it, and then ultimately tripped into, some because of his own doing, some because of others, and said, oh, maybe I don't need to be on such a pedestal where I'm inaccessible. Maybe I need to be more accessible in a way that people can relate to me and always, not always think of me in positive ways, but, find that balance of artistry and humanity at the same time in a way that Michael wasn't afforded. So, and even again, to what Michael used to say, study the greats and become greater. Beyonce is a clear manifestation of that. So we got to think about what not only Michael's career and what he achieved, but how it laid the blueprint for somebody like Beyonce to take it further.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Thank you for that, Randall. That was a word.
Bars.
That was a bar. Yeah, that was a bar. Like the Gen Z, Gen X. I don't even know what.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't know. I'm a millennial.
Gen Z. Yeah, we millennials.